check your R version by running version in the console. So we can do that just here down here in the console, version, and I have now R version 4.0.4 lost library book. If you don't have something that new or newer, then you may want to upgrade in order to follow the Learn R and this video. The easiest way to get the libraries for today is to load the library tidyverse. Tidyverse. Yeah, and for me, that's just going to load. If you don't have it, then you may need to install packages, tidyverse. Just do that. I'm not going to reinstall because I already have them loaded. Now, you always have the option to browse the vignettes of any package that you load. So the first argument to this browse vignettes function is the package name. So like with install packages, you can say browse vignettes. Usually shows up in your list, and then you can say tidyverse. Tidyverse. And we go to the HTML page where there are options here. You can see that you can look at source code or HTMLs, and usually these include some kind of code that you can run and the general philosophy behind the package and the library and all the functions in the library. That includes a manifesto, so you may want to check that out. Hadley Wickham is the author of this thing, the main author, and he's written some quite useful things about how to use these tools. About processes, it's also listed there, but essentially we want to try to understand what it is that we're working on and to make sure that that's in the right shape before we start trying to communicate about it. Good coding style is like correct punctuation. Without it, things are hard to read. So we'll make sure we write clearly and we make lots and lots of notes. I like to make a lot of notes in my code. Keeping your data tidy. When you do that, each column is a variable and each row is an observation. This consistent structure lets you focus on your questions and not fighting the data to perform the different functions. So a data set is tidy when each variable has its own column, each observation has its own row, and each value has its own cell. So it looks like this. Every row, every column a variable, every row an observation, and every cell a single value. Once we have our data tidy, we may want to transform it. So we narrow in this way on observations of interest, and we create new variables that are functions of existing variables and calculate sets of summary statistics. Usually arguments start with a data frame if we're using the deep library. So we can use select to return a subset of the columns, filter to extract a subset of rows, rename to rename variables, mutate to add new variables, group by to split data into groups, and summarize to generate tables of summary statistics. We'll use all those functions. Getting your data into R should be relatively straightforward. If you have a data set, it should be in a format like comma separated values, and it should be in a tidy format. You can load the data for this course with the read CSV function. Anytime you come across a new function, of course, you can say read CSV and see what it does. That's your help file. You get a help file here, and you see that there's read CSV. The first thing is the file name, and there are a bunch of arguments that you can change about this function. So we're going to read CSV, and the CSV is participants data. I can look in my files here to see if it's there in the same folder structure as this untitled. Participants data should be there. So participants. Yeah, and now we've got the data set just loaded, and it's showing up down here in the console, rather long and hard to read, but there it is, all of your data on the questions I've asked you. And if you don't want to run that help file every time, of course, you can add a hashtag there. Read CSV, participants data CSV. Keep your data in the same folder structure as our project file. So that's what I'm looking at down here in the files section of my R Studio interface. These are the files, and the data is listed here. It could be listed in a subset, that is a folder called data or something like that, but it shouldn't be in some other location. Let's keep it all together as one project. Let's use the head function in R. So you can look at the top rows as we saw. That's really too much to look at with participants data. So I can, if I assign, let's say if I assign that to an object, data, let's call it participants data. Participants data is read CSV. So now participants data has this assigned to it. So I can call head participants data, usually shows up. And now I'm just looking at the top 6 rows. That's the default 6 rows. Should get the same result. We can use names. These are just quick functions that I use to look at the data quickly. So you can check the names of the variables in the data with the names function. So if we, again, we call names on participants data, then we get all of the names of all the variables in the data set. It's quite handy. That should be names here. I'll change that later. We can use the str function. So if we use str, that's the structure. Then we get information about all of the variables. There are 32 observations at the time of my looking at this of 13 variables, and people are from different batches. That is the expected date of graduation. They have different ages. You have different ages. You have different genders, etc. Right? Some people have academic parents, some don't, and some people travel different distances to get to the office. Anyway, you get some information about that. That's numeric, right? The distance in kilometers. This one's a character, right? The name of a continent. This one's a character, binary, really, no and yes. I want to show you how to use this $ option here. So this is a selection option. You can pick a particular variable in your data with this thing. Like let's go for looking at the age. So we've got one of these variables in your data set is called age. So let's use that option by calling participants data and using the $ and age, since it's one of the variables. And I'll get here in the console a list of all the ages that you've entered into the data set over the years. When we're wrangling with the dplyr library, so let's load the dplyr library. We're going to add a new section here, dplyr. So I can go library, dplyr. And now the dplyr library loads. If it doesn't, of course, then we need this install packages option, right? Install packages quotes dplyr. So there are some tasks now to test your new skills. It would be great if you would walk through the tasks that we've just described on the diamonds data. So the diamonds data, if you do diamonds, you'll see that there's a data set. Actually, you may need to load the library ggplot. Let's see. Sorry, library. You may need to run this ggplot2, right, in order to get that set if it's not showing up for you. And of course, if library doesn't work, then you need to install the package. But essentially, it's a data set, really big data set of diamonds, different information about the cuts of diamonds and the color, et cetera. So I want you to go through that data set and work on the same tasks. So we want to select, first of all, the carat and price. To filter only where carat is greater than 0.5. Rename the price as cost and mutate the name so that it's called expensive if it's greater than the mean of price or cost, and it's called cheap if it's otherwise. And then group by splitting the data into cheap and expensive. And then summarize, so give summary statistics of those variables. Great. And then you get that summary statistics based on whether things are cheap or expensive. Yeah, so good luck. Have fun doing these, running through the Learn R and also doing these tasks. And please check in with us in the Slack or through any other means. Make sure to check in with us and with your colleagues if you have any issues or if you want to share your successes. And we'll see you in the next seminar.